What's up, everyone? Thank you for joining in to the second Concussion Discussion podcast. I'm your host, Austin Sherlock. I'm super excited to do the second podcast, and let me tell you why. Because today, the first podcast, after editing and production, got to iTunes, which I thought would be a much bigger deal than it ended up being. So shout out to my best friend and producer, David. I appreciate you, man. We are also working on YouTube as we speak. He's actually uploading it as I talk into this microphone right now. So for those of you that don't have iTunes, very excited to get that to your ears via YouTube, and then we're just going to try and keep expanding and see where this thing goes. This is a passion project for me. This is it's just for fun because, you know, typing on a keyboard gets kind of boring. So very happy about that. It is a Monday, April 2nd, and just kind of coming over the Easter hangover. Really excited to get into this podcast because UFC 223, regardless of the drama and the recent news, is still a fucking banger, and cannot wait to get into this with you guys. Before I get really into MMA too much, UFC 223, I want to cover something that I talked about in the first podcast. If you've had a chance to listen to that first podcast, obviously the timing's a little bit weird, but I want to talk about Anthony Joshua versus Joseph Parker. A lot of guys were writing Joseph Parker off, and I did not think that was the case. If you listen to it, I actually said that, you know, I'd probably have Joshua via decision or maybe a later round KO. And that's kind of how that fight went, and went all 12 rounds, you know, and I also talked about the odds. You know, if I was trying to make money, then I would definitely put some money on Joseph Parker because those odds were just insane. But it was a fun one to watch. A lot of guys said that it was boring because, you know, there wasn't a whole lot of action to the rookie eye. But if you look at the range that those guys are fighting at, it was a beautiful thing to watch. You know, two heavyweights, two giant men. Joshua's, you know, 6'6". He's a giant dude. You know, for him and Joseph Parker to stay in the range that they were in, it was a really cool thing to watch. And now, obviously, the only fight to make happen is Anthony Joshua versus Deontay Wilder, as Anthony Joshua holds 3 of the 4 belts. The only one he doesn't hold, Wilder has, to be the undisputed heavyweight champion. So it was a fun fight. I enjoyed it, and that build up to the Deontay Wilder Anthony Joshua fight will be even better. God willing that fight is made. But it's the world of combat sports. Anything can happen, as obviously proved in these last few days. And how dare Tony Ferguson do that to us on April Fool's Day? So cruel. So, I guess that is going to lead me into my first current event for the week. So, let's see. I kind of want to lead up to I don't want to break the big news immediately. I'll pick up where I left off a little bit last week, talking about Darren Till and Stephen Thompson. So, I broke down this fight a little bit last week. It wasn't confirmed. But obviously, if you have been following the hype that, you know, both fighters wanted this fight, and, you know, following the hype of how much the fans wanted this fight, kind of knew it was going to happen. So I, you know, a little bit prematurely talked about it. But it is official in Liverpool for May. Cannot wait for that fight. And Darren Till, I read today, is predicting a 3rd round knockout of Stephen Thompson. Now, this is cool. At least he's not doing the whole Conor spiel where I'm going to knock everybody out, you know, in the first round, because let's be honest, ain't nobody knocking out Stephen Wonderboy Thompson in the first round. His movement is too dynamic, and he's just too good to be caught that early. Wonderboy has definitely shown that he can be caught by big shots, but not early. It takes a while to put that puzzle together. So again, I'm probably going to talk about this fight every single podcast because there's probably going to be weekly news that comes out about this thing, and I swear to God, if one of these guys gets hurt and this fight doesn't happen, I'm going to stop watching all MMA. I'm just going to be a baseball fan, and that's it. Because that's torture, and look, I love baseball, but to watch it on TV is fucking boring. But if this fight doesn't happen, I'm going to lose my mind. And I'm not going to know what to do with myself. So, like I said, probably going to talk about that a lot, but I don't care because it's a great fight. And in the world of MMA, there's new stuff, new news that comes all the time. So, really, I guess all the current events that I have on my phone right now go right back to Tony Ferguson pulling out of UFC 223. So, background for those that are a little unfamiliar or just don't know. If you don't know, I don't know why you're still listening to this podcast. I applaud you and I thank you for doing so, for being a supporter. But if you don't know, let me explain to you. So, this was the 4th time this fight was supposed to happen. They've booked this fight 4 times. This marks the 2nd time that Tony was hurt, I believe, and then, 2 times before either Khabib couldn't make weight or he was injured or whatever the deal was. So, coming into this fight, some build-up. Conor knocks out Eddie Alvarez in the 2nd round, UFC 205. Conor goes on to do his thing, fights Floyd Mayweather. Hasn't fought in 508 days, I think it is now, something like that. So, obviously, you can't have, even though Conor's a huge star, you can't have him holding up a whole division to where you can't have a real champion because the champion won't come back. That champion being Conor right now. So, they do an interim title fight last summer. They do Tony Ferguson versus Kevin Lee for the interim title. Tony wins that fight by triangle choke. It was beautiful. He looked great. Then you have the resurgence of, all right, let's actually do Khabib Nurmagomedov since he's healthy versus Tony Ferguson. We've tried to book this fight 3 times already. Let's do it again 4 times the charm. Everything is going well. No injuries. We're going up to fight week, and everyone's getting super excited because from a stylistic matchup, holy shit, this fight is an MMA fan's dream come true. And then Tony says, while doing media, I hurt my leg. What the fuck? So this is 4 times this fight was supposed to happen, and now it's not happening yet again. I wish I could say I was surprised, but I'm really not. While I was really looking forward to this fight, I wasn't exactly going all in on it as far as, my excitement. Because I knew, look, I'm an analyst, right? Like, it's all about reading a trend. If you walk through a door 3 times, and every time you walk through that door, you get punched in the face, guess what's going to happen the 4th time? You're probably going to get punched in the fucking face, right? So, I'm bummed this fight isn't happening, but, I can't say that I'm surprised just putting my analyst, army guy hat on, because that's what I do, as a 9 to 5. So, I'm super bummed, but in the words of Max Holloway, it is what it is, which is a perfect transition. Max Holloway, the featherweight champion of the world at 145 pounds, coming in to fight Khabib Nurmagomedov for the lightweight strap. Look, I don't like this fight for Max, obviously because it's on 6 days, but, I don't like it for him because I'm a fan of him, but you have to give the guy his due. He's a fucking savage. No one wants to fight Khabib. There's a reason Conor didn't come back to defend his title on short notice against Khabib. If it was Eddie Alvarez, if it was a Rafael dos Anjos, if he was still at 155, really almost anyone in that top tier of competition, Conor would have come back to defend his title to show that he is the number 1 dog on the yard. But no one wants to fight Khabib. No one. And also, I'm pretty fucking skeptical about Tony Ferguson injuring his leg during media week. I saw that man on Instagram kicking a steel pole with no injury, but then he miraculously hurt his leg doing media work. I digress. Going back to what I was talking about, Max Holloway is a fucking savage. He does not give a shit. He just wants to fight. And Max has a chance right now, if he pulls this off, which, I don't think he does, which I'll get into later. He has a chance to be the 145 and 155 champion, something that only Conor did before. But I actually think that Max defends both if he were to win both. So, crazy fight, just a crazy amount of circumstances going on right now surrounding this fight, but I cannot fucking wait. And you know what? I'll tell you right now, I'm so much happier with Khabib versus Max Holloway than I was with Tony versus Khabib. Well, I think Tony versus Khabib would be definitely the better fight as far as styles. I can actually lay my head down at night and say, okay, all Khabib has to do is make weight. To where before, it didn't happen 3 times, and there's all these variables that it was just stressful. So I'm very happy to watch this fight and very happy to not stress out about this fight anymore. And Dana White also said, and I think this is one of the questions later, so I don't know if I'll get too much more in-depth with it. Dana White actually said, when asked, that he will not book this fight ever again. Because, look, the MMA gods don't want this fight to happen, obviously. So, coming off of that, these are just really transitions into each other because this is all the hot topic. Brian Ortega says he agreed to face Khabib Nurmagomedov at UFC 223, but Max Holloway got the fight instead. Brian Ortega just knocked out Frankie Edgar, who was number 1 in line to face Max Holloway for the 145-pound featherweight title. Obviously, that's going to be put on hold now that Max Holloway is going up to 155 pounds, at least in the interim. So we'll see. While I do believe that, I do think it was kind of a attention-grabbing thing to do. Instead of just being happy for the UFC, you got to go in and just say, well, they offered me the fight first. Look, I love Brian Ortega, but in my mind, when you do that, you're kind of just saying it just to say it, to make headlines. What are you trying to do? Prove to people that you're not a bitch and that you are... Look, we know you're not a bitch. You just knocked out Frankie Edgar in the first round. Really, to me, no reason to tweet that, but I kind of get it. Oh, while I'm going through these some of these current events, I found out today I've got a hernia, so that's really cool. I had some abdomen pain, and everyone thought at work that it was appendicitis, and I decided to tough it out through the weekend. Went to the doctor today, and got to have a bunch of scans run, so that's really cool. Also, if you've ever had a hernia before, and you are so dramatic about the pain, it's not that bad. Calm down. Anyways, yeah, I already kind of touched on this. Dana White, and I'm reading off MMAfighting.com. I love these guys. Dana White on if the UFC will ever book Ferguson versus Nurmagomedov again. His answer, hell no. Yeah, I don't blame Dana for this. It makes sense to me. I wouldn't book that fight either. 4 times out of 4 times. Look, you put so much marketing and, I was there for the initial press conference in Boston right before UFC 220, and there's a lot of production, a lot of marketing that goes into these fights. So I do not blame Dana for saying that at all. I wouldn't do that either. So next current event, I keep saying current events. It's really all UFC 223 tied, but you guys get it. Nate Diaz offers mocking message in response to Tony Ferguson pulling out of UFC 223. So basically what Nate says is, LOL, these guys can't even make it to war. While you are correct, Nathan Diaz, when's the last time you fought? When's the last time you fought? You fought Conor in a fight that you lost, not at your weight division. Meanwhile, everyone's talking about how Conor's kind of been out of the game. Look, he's at least had 2 fights, and these guys are at least trying to fight. Nate Diaz, I don't agree with your statement. If you took the LOL out of that and just said these guys can't even make it to war, okay, fine. You're right there because it has, it's supposed to happen, 4 times now. But when you put that LOL there, you're trying to be funny. Dude, you haven't fought, so don't care what you have to say. So, and then I guess really just the last one to get into, which just kind of drives me a little bit crazy. Josh Barnett will not be able to fight in the UFC for at least 6 months. So, if you guys aren't aware, Josh Barnett, so USADA came in and did all the drug testing for the UFC for performance-enhancing drugs and what have you. They are super strict. It's like the Olympics. It's fucking crazy. Well, Josh Barnett, he has been pleading his innocence really for the last, say, year and a half, 18 months. He's been pleading. He got caught doing something, allegedly. He's been trying to prove his innocence ever since. And about 2 weeks ago, he finally won his case, and they found that he was doing nothing wrong. Not intentionally, at least. It was a tainted supplement, whatever. So now you're taking this man, he's 40 years old, or around 40 years old, and now you're telling him that, so he can't make an income. He can't fight. That's literally his livelihood. That's what he does. That's how he provides for his family. He can't do that for 18 months. And now you're telling him he has to wait another 6 months, which I get it, to re-enter the testing pool. You have to be in that testing pool for at least, what it looks like is 6 months. But goddamn, man, give the guy a break. He proved his innocence. Make an exception. It's a little shitty to, not a little, it's a lot shitty to hold this guy, hold more money from him when he can get back in that heavyweight division in the UFC and really compete at that heavyweight division. So it's just a little frustrating. While I do love USADA, I do not like some of their business practices, and I do think they should work on making more exceptions. So now that brings me to UFC 223 fight predictions, a little bit of a breakdown, and then I will get into some fan questions for you guys. Not going to break down every fight on this card, really just the ones that I personally find entertaining. I think looking at this, I'm looking at the whole fight card right now. I see Lobov versus Alex Caceres. That's an awesome fight. Caceres being he's like watching a ballerina in an octagon. It's hilarious, but he's dangerous for sure. And then Lobov, he's Conor's boy. A lot of people refer to him as the GOAT. Obviously, being very, that's used very jokingly, as his MMA record is super salty. So that'll be a fun one to watch. Another one I think on the early prelims is Bec Rawlings versus Ashley Evans Smith. That's a great fight. I love both these girls. Might be one of the most attractive fights maybe ever in the UFC. They are both smoke shows, so that'll be fun. Looking forward to that one. So I will take in the Rawlings Evans Smith. I'm actually going to take Ashley Evans Smith. Maybe I'm a little biased. She did do a whole thing for the troops. She went downrange and hung out with the troops. That was awesome to see. So maybe I'm a little biased there, but fuck it, whatever. Lobov versus Caceres. I'll take Lobov there. I think he pressures him and he kind of smothers him. And when you have a straightforward, boxer that will just march you down, that leaves a lot less room for you to do anything fancy, any sort of spinning attacks. I think Lobov smothers him and wins that fight. And Lobov's real only, not his only, but his biggest threat has been when guys want to wrestle with him and take him down, and Alex Caceres is not that guy. So I will take Ashley Evans Smith and Lobov by unanimous decision. Ooh, Ray Borg versus Brandon Moreno. I think this is a really cool fight. Ray Borg obviously coming off of that loss to Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson. No shame in losing a fight against the greatest of all time, as many myself refer to him as. Brandon Moreno's a Ultimate Fighter alumni. He's looked good recently, but I think Borg's just going to be a little bit too much for him. I think Borg takes him down. I think Borg definitely dominates the stand-up for sure. I think he controls the pace. I think if Borg decides to take it to the ground, Moreno's definitely going to threaten with a lot of really tricky submissions, and as that is his game, he's great off the bottom, on his back. But I think Borg is too savvy and will be too strong on top. So I will take Ray Borg by third round TKO. Felice Herrig versus Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Great fight. Herrig is just a little monster, man. She's a pit bull. It's like every time, people try to count her out, she shows up and she just does the damn thing. But Karolina Kowalkiewicz is, she's just a monster on the feet. This is a really, really, really tough one to pick. I think definitely Herrig has the advantage on the ground. Kowalkiewicz has the advantage standing up. She's very technical. I think Kowalkiewicz has enough to withstand the onslaught of if Herrig takes her to the ground. I will take Kowalkiewicz by split decision. Yeah, split decision. Ooh, Paul Felder versus Al Iaquinta. This is a great fight. So if you guys don't know about Al Iaquinta, he's definitely an interesting guy to follow. He's really he's a fighter's fighter for sure. So basically, Al gets pissed off with the UFC and openly says to Dana White and, just the UFC as a whole, fuck you, you don't pay me enough. I'm going to do real estate in my hometown of New York. You look at his record, dude's a stud, man. So he's got wins over Kevin Lee, who just fought for the title, unanimous decision there. Wins over Ross Pearson, knocked out Joe Lozon, split decision over Jorge Masvidal, and his last fight knocked out Diego Sanchez. So this is a great fight, just by a really entertaining fighter as well. And then Paul Felder, he's just kind of doing the damn thing. He's kind of having a little bit of a resurgence, I guess, is kind of the best way to put it. You look at his UFC record, he's got losses to Edson Barbosa and Ross Pearson. No shame there. Comes back, has wins over Josh Berkman, Darren Cruikshank, then loses to Francisco Trinaldo, and now has 3 straight wins. 2 of those being Charles Oliveira and Stevie Ray. And Stevie Ray is definitely a stud, and so is Charles Oliveira. Very interesting. This is a really cool fight. I was actually super impressed with Paul Felder's ground game against Charles Oliveira in his last fight. So I will take Al Iaquinta via early second round KO. But I would not be surprised if Paul Felder wins this fight via knockout, submission, or decision. This fight would not surprise me. So, big night for the lightweights going into the next fight. You've got Michael Chiesa, number 9 lightweight in the world, versus number 12, Anthony Showtime Pettis. So, for my people back home, if you don't know Anthony Showtime Pettis, how dare you? He's from Milwaukee. He's a stud, former champion of the world at lightweight, and former title challenger at 145 pounds. So pulling up Chiesa's record, he beat Al Iaquinta, who I just talked about. He lost to Jorge Masvidal. He beat Francisco Trinaldo. Lost to Joe Lozon, so you can see a lot of common opponents here. This has been a common thread within the UFC lightweight division, especially. A lot of these top 15 guys just kind of getting stuck, facing the same guys. But after that loss to Lozon, went on a 3-fight winning streak, beating Jim Miller by in round 2 via submission, as well as Beneil Dariush. And then goes on to fight Kevin Lee, loses by a very controversial rear naked choke. So Kevin Lee has been a rear naked choke. And Michael Chiesa looks like he's going out, but never taps. The ref stops it. And then Kevin Lee goes on to fight Tony Ferguson. Tony Ferguson just pulled out. So you can kind of see what this thing looks like. This is what I talked about the last podcast, is this MMA math shit does not work. It's a circle, right? It's not like some linear math equation. It doesn't work like that. So then you've got Pettis. A lot of guys think that he's still got a lot left in him. Personally, I think Pettis, I'd love for him to prove me wrong, but I think Pettis, I think his time is done really in the top level. So he beats Benson Henderson in WEC. That's where he kind of did that famous Showtime kick where he runs off the cage, kicks Benson Henderson in the face. That was awesome. So then he fights Jeremy Stevens, wins by split decision, fights Joe Lozon, knocks him out. Then he knocks out Cowboy Cerrone via body kick. That was insane. Then he fights Benson Henderson again and won that via first round submission. I believe it was an armbar. Then he fights Gilbert Melendez to retain his title. So he fought Benson Henderson to win the title, fights Gilbert Melendez, all-time great, to retain his title via round 2 submission. Then loses to Javier Dos Anjos. Then loses to Eddie Alvarez. Then loses to Edson Barboza. Beats Charles Oliveira. Fights Max Holloway, trying to go down to 145. He did not make that weight. But Max is a beast, so no shame in that. Comes back, beats Jim Miller. Then his next fight was in Norfolk, which I was there for that fight, where he beat Dustin Poirier, where Dustin Poirier beat Anthony Pettis in a very weird fight. Poirier had body triangle on him. Anthony Pettis rolled the wrong way, and it looked like, messed up his ribs. So, obviously, this is a really interesting fight. This is very key because if Pettis wins this fight, I think he cracks back into the top 10. Chiesa loses this fight, and he drops out of that top 10. Oh, man. I will take Chiesa the second round submission. I'll say rear naked choke. I say this because Anthony Pettis is extremely dynamic in his stand-up. Unfortunately, when you're so dynamic in your stand-up and you throw a lot of kicks, a lot of flying techniques, you do leave yourself open for the takedown. And I think Chiesa is way too great of a wrestler to miss those opportunities. I think he takes him down, has a slight edge on the ground, and wears him down and eventually catches him in something. And you've got Moicano versus Calvin Kattar. I guess I'll take Moicano there. Don't really care about that fight too much, but I'll take Moicano. Boom! And then that leads us to Rose Namajunas versus Joanna Jedrzejczyk in the fucking rematch. Holy shit, am I excited for this fight. One, I'm excited because I'm a Joanna fanboy. Joanna is my girl, man. She is just this Polish beast. In their last fight, Rose came out, shocked the world, knocked Joanna out. Joanna said, I had a really shitty weight cut, blah, 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 blah. Whether that's true or not, that's not for me to speculate about. Who knows? Shitty weight cuts happen. So, watching that first fight, there's not a whole lot you use in that first fight to break down the second fight because it ended so quickly. Look, if it went 5 rounds and it was a split decision for Rose or for Joanna, there's a lot to take away because you just got 25 minutes worth of fighting out of that, 25 minutes worth of film out of that fight. That was not the case. So we don't have a lot to go off of. I love both girls. I think Rose, she's young. She's 25. Also cute as shit. Very nice person. Joanna looks like she's calmed down a little bit. I feel like that loss has humbled her and motivated her a lot. In this fight, I will take Joanna. I think Rose probably takes her down maybe a few times. I don't think she can hold her down. I think Joanna gets back up and does what Joanna does and pieces that face up, that beautiful, beautiful face of Rose Namajunas. So we'll take Joanna by unanimous decision. We'll say that. And then the main event, the UFC.com, which is what I'm reading off of, still has Tony versus Khabib. But obviously, as stated earlier, we know that Tony is out of that fight. So it's going to be Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Max Blessed Holloway for the lightweight title. Man, there's so much to be said about this fight. I don't even really know where to begin. So I think that, looking at Khabib versus Tony, and look, I've had this in my brain for the last month, so excuse me for kind of going off on a tangent on this fight for a minute. Look, it was supposed to happen, so I'm going to talk about it and what I think was going to happen before this happened. I think Khabib versus Tony was the more interesting fight as far as styles. Tony obviously having the edge standing up. Khabib's not a world beater on the feet, but his grappling is just next level. It's not even fair. But Tony Ferguson has proved that off of his back, he can pull the most ridiculous shit, out of his bag of tricks. So I think stylistically that was the more interesting fight. It had more of the wow factor. Now, this probably isn't going to be popular, but I actually think this is a more dangerous fight for Khabib on the feet against Max Holloway. Tony Ferguson has a lot of unorthodox shit that he throws. A lot of weird elbows, weird kicks, which I think that as I stated earlier, the more dynamic you are on the feet, typically it leaves a lot more openings to be taken down. And against a guy like a Chiesa, and then God forbid a Khabib, they're not missing those opportunities. So now you have Max coming in, and Max is a very fundamental guy. He doesn't throw a lot of crazy or really anything crazy. His distance, his range, the control of the distance is just insane. He's kind of like a Namajunas where he will always catch you at the end of his punches. And he doesn't throw a lot of kicks, just very, very fundamental boxing. And Khabib has been caught by that same style when he fought Michael Johnson. So I think this goes probably to the late second, early third round. I will take Khabib by TKO against Max Holloway. But I do think that Max Holloway will land good shots and will actually stun Khabib. But also, if Khabib gets hit, and if Khabib loses his fight to Max Holloway, I won't be surprised. I will not be surprised, because even on 6 days notice, Max Holloway is just a freaking monster. So that wraps up UFC 223 fight picks. Now getting into some questions. So I've got questions from Dennis from last week, more questions from him, and then my boy Steven, who sent these all the way in from Korea. So thanks for that, dude. I appreciate it. First question from Dennis. Happy or sad about UFC 223? Is this fight cursed? I'm happy and I'm sad. I'm sad because this fight didn't happen. There's so much buildup. Happy because they, sad because, fight didn't happen. Happy because they found a late replacement. and Max Holloway is just a savage. Is this fight cursed? Yes, of course. That's 4 out of 4. Of course this fight is cursed. Our super fight's the next big thing, champ versus champ. Is this good for the sport, and how do you feel about it? Well, super fights are always, like the champ versus champ thing has always been a big deal, but hasn't been as prevalent as it is right now. The UFC roster is growing so much. That's the reason they can do these champ versus champ fights. It is good for the sport. I think the UFC should add a 165. I think they should add a 225 because more belts. It's kind of like the old boxing model. You know, a lot of like UFC MMA purists think that it's going to dilute the sport a little bit by adding more belts. I disagree. If you look at the boxing model, there's a reason that boxers and boxing just makes more money. One, it's because it's an older sport. Two, everybody loves belts. So I would say, yes, it is good for the sport, and I think I answered how I feel about it. What's next for Holloway if he gets a win over Khabib? He's talked about fighting at every weight before. What's next for Holloway? What's next for Holloway if he beats Khabib? Conor. Conor has beat Holloway in the past. Granted, Holloway was young. I would definitely pick Conor in that fight again at 155. But I think that's the perfect opportunity for Conor McGregor to come back and show that he is arguably the baddest man on the planet. And then, look, if Holloway wins, that's the best case scenario for Conor, because then he never has to fight Khabib. So, who's the baddest fighter in the UFC, male and female? Baddest fighter in the UFC, male, talking pound for pound, I will say Demetrius Johnson. For male and female, I will say Cyborg. Easy. But then Joanna's a close second. And then Amanda Nunes, just savages. So I think that covers those from Dennis. Now I've got to go to my boy Steven, who sent these all the way from Korea. So I personally think Joanna's going to get her belt back. What are your thoughts on this rematch, and will it possibly be a trilogy? Love the rematch. I think everyone loves this rematch. And yes, it will be a trilogy. I think Joanna has already stated that since Rose gave her the immediate rematch, that Joanna will give her that rematch. If she wins, obviously. Not taking out Rose. But if Rose wins this fight, yeah, no trilogy. So the third question, one fight that no one seems to mention is Carolina versus Felice Herrig in the prelims. How do you think those two match up style-wise? I personally like Carolina more, but that's not taking anything from Felice either. Anything can happen in a fight. You know, I think Carolina beats her. Obviously, Felice Herrig has the advantage on the ground, but I think Carolina has enough to get back to her feet, and I think she pulls it out via split decision. I love this question. Your thoughts on the extent of Tony injuries? Is it a serious one? And Dana White's statement on how that match will never happen again. So obviously it's serious. Tony's a savage. As much shit as I said earlier, you know, as skeptical as I am about this fight, yes, for Tony to pull out, it had to be serious. But I'm still pissed about it. So I'm going to be petty about it probably until this fight either happens or really probably until I die, to be honest. And Dana White's statement on how the match will never happen again. Yes, I do believe that because if I was Dana White, I wouldn't do that either. I would not book them for a fourth fight. So I already talked about Nate Diaz's possible return because you're a huge fan of the Diaz brothers. I'm a huge fan of the Diaz brothers. I'm a bigger fan. I don't want to say that. Look, Nate Diaz, look, I'm a bigger fan of Nick Diaz because he's a fighter's fighter. Nate Diaz needs to get calm down on the keyboard a little bit and get back into the UFC. I want Nate Diaz to come back and fight Eddie Alvarez. And then you can maybe bargain that, depending on how that division plays out, to do a Conor McGregor 3 for the title, depending on how this whole shit show of the lightweight division plays out. But yes, definitely come back, fight Conor at 155. Whether that's for a belt or not, really doesn't fucking matter. Thoughts on how Holloway versus McGregor 2 would play out, given both fighters have improved since they last met? Yes, 100% they have both improved. Both guys were youngins. Max, I think, was 20, 21 years old. Conor actually tore his ACL or MCL in that fight. Still ended up winning. That's why Conor ended up grappling a lot. If they fought at 155, I would give the nod to Conor for sure. I think he's more creative. He has more power. He's more accurate. I would give that to Conor. If they fought at 145, I'd definitely give that to Max Holloway, but I don't think Conor ever goes back to 145. So that's kind of a stretch. And I think that closes up all the questions. Find us on iTunes, Concussion Discussion with Austin Sherlock. Just look up Concussion Discussion with Austin. If you hit search there, it will come up. And I don't want to tell you to give me a 5-star rating. Give me what the hell you think I deserve. I love doing this stuff. So Instagram is just the Concussion Discussion. So go there, like it, follow it. If you have questions, send it to concussiondiscussionpodcast@gmail.com. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm right. Do the whole damn thing. This has been the Concussion Discussion Podcast, Episode 2, and I'm out.